Okay. Thanks for coming along today and welcome to our training event, which is going to focus on carrying out the Runoff Risk Assessment General Action of the Waters of Life Agri-Environmental Programme. My name is Anne Goggin. I'm the Project Manager for the Waters of Life, and I'm joined this morning by my colleagues Mark Desmond, Catchment Scientist, Ross O'Donoghue, our Communications Lead, and Paul Duffy, our GIS and Data Manager. The runoff risk assessment is a required action for all participants in the Waters of Life Agri-Environmental Programme. And this is because it offers a real opportunity to identify where practical measures can be taken to reduce pressures on water quality on a particular farm. It's also a real opportunity to raise awareness of water quality issues with the farmer and to raise their understanding of how their land management practices can impact on local stream and river health. So I'm just going to share my screen now and give you a quick overview of what we're going to cover this morning. Are you seeing that?
Not yet.
Okay, let me know when you can.
There we go.
Oops. Okay, so in a few minutes, I'll hand you over to Mark, who will talk about the preparation for the site assessment. This will be done on a web portal, on a desktop. And then we'll have questions and answers. After that, Mark will move on to telling you how to use the app in the field, again, followed by time for questions. And then the final bit is the review and submission of the runoff risk assessment through the web portal again when you get back to the office. From a housekeeping point of view, we just ask you to keep your microphones muted. If you have questions, you can either put them in the chat or you can put your hand up during the question and answer session and ask them verbally, but just to keep all verbal questions until that question and answer session. So with that, I'll hand you over to Ross. Sorry, not Ross, Mark.
Hi guys, thanks very much for coming today. First thing I wanted to say was thanks for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us for this. Really what I'll be discussing today is kind of tools that you can use for the runoff risk assessment, and we'll be going over them in a bit of detail. So the first thing I want to talk to you about is the desktop overview, and this is the first stage in our runoff risk assessment. And to do that, we have to use our web portal. So I'm just going to share it with you now on my screen and let me know if it's working. Is it working away there?
Yeah.
Yeah, perfect. So as you see, you can come to this web link and you will be greeted by this this screen here, and we'll be asking you to put in your login details. So this is the email that you provided, as well as your password. When you sign in for the first time, you'll be greeted with a window which asks you to set up two-factor authentication. And this is just to keep this secure. We're a department-based project, so we need to make sure that everything is GDPR compliant and we're not losing any data. So there's two-factor authentication there. So what I'm doing here now is I'm going into Google Authenticator, which you'll have full descriptions on how to download it here, and I'm putting in that verification code. And don't worry, you're not seeing any secrets here. This is changes every minute, so you're not reading, you shouldn't read. When we first go into the portal, then we're greeted by the list of our farmers. Currently, you have access to this portal, but you'll only see one dummy farm. You'll have that G or A, however many numbers, and then a single number at the end. And that's just a dummy farm for you to play around with before you actually get issued your own farms. We just don't want you making any mistakes on the runoff risk assessment and then submitting them accidentally. So if you go into the first time, you'll only see this one farm here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the farm and I will then see further details. At the moment, you won't see any details. You'll only see this singular code, which I'll just go back. You'll see one of these codes here. All of these codes will be sent to you with details of the farmer in an Excel sheet, and you'll be able to cross-reference them and be able to get the details of the farmer, and this is just to keep them anonymized for the moment. Once we have developed the security for this system, you'll have full details of all of the farmers on this. But we're just going through our security checks at the moment. So you'll have details of the farm here eventually. But for the runoff risk assessment, what we want you to do is we want you to go down here and click this ORA button. And once you go into that ORA button, this is now we're into the actual runoff risk assessment portal. So what it'll do is it'll load up all the map data for the farm. And this is a farm within our grainy catchment. What you'll be first greeted with is 2 large blocks, or however many blocks that the farm is split into, and we call these flow units. These are essentially just bite-sized sections of the farm that you do individual runoff risk assessments within. And really, what it is just splitting up the farm and making it more manageable for you to do your runoff risk assessments. There shouldn't be many of them, but what will happen is it'll split off things like outblocks. At the moment, there's in this farm that we have, with all of the land in the scheme is centered around just these 2 blocks, but you may have multiple blocks depending if the farmer is renting or has outblocks in other parts of the catchment, and they'll all be their individual flow units. What you'll also see then is these points, and these points represent farmyards and points of interest. The farmyards are in blue here, and they're the main farmyard, as you can see here. I'll just zoom in a bit. And then also any other sheds or holding areas that might be found in other places within the farm. Our points of interest are those areas that have been identified by the Waters of Life team as being areas that you might want to focus in on. All of these points can be edited, and we want you to edit them. What we've put in is not comprehensive. They're only at a first glance, and we really want you to, the whole point of this overview section is to go in and find more points of interest and try and identify areas that you want to focus your runoff risk assessment. So how do we go about doing that? So I'm just going to go through the various different sections of the runoff risk assessment or of the overview, which will help guide your runoff risk assessment. Yeah. So the first thing we'll see is this initial impression, which it shows you aerial imagery, which is probably one of the 2 most important tools you can use when you're doing an assessment for the runoff risk assessment, because you'll see on the ground, various different management practices. Again, this is a snapshot though. It could show something that's only temporary, or a field that was in transition. It might not show the current status on the ground. We want you to assess the current status on the ground. We're also going to show you things like this, like the contours. So as you can see, I can derive from this map that this farm is all on a hill. We would initially think that maybe it was sloping down this way because there's a pond here, but actually the pond is at the top of the hill, and we can see that from the contour lines here. If I zoom in, I can see it's going from 140 up to 200 up to 220. I can also see that the contour split the flow of the water going this way and that way. So all of this water body here is receiving water from this side of the farm, whereas the likelihood is that the water from here is flowing down to this water body. And the second thing I want you to point out is that these water lines here are the EPA river net route. So this is the EPA water line. So it's kind of what you would see on EPA maps, and what they define as a water feature. It's also what we use currently to assess the riverside habitat. But there's more than those water features on the farm, and we want you to click on this. This brings up all the drainage ditches and unmapped streams as well. These are also not comprehensive. The farmer might be aware of other streams or ditches that are not on these maps, but they do give you a bit more extra information. So definitely click these on when you're having a look. As you can see, there's a stream that runs the whole way down here. It's probably a naturalized stream, and it joins in and it's feeding this pond here in the center. So I'll definitely want to check this out and make sure there's no issues with it. And also we can see that most of the fields around here are also split by this drainage ditch here and then going down into this stream, which is feeding off the farm. So actually it doesn't go towards this, it goes towards this stream here. Other things you should be aware of is that we can open up what parts of the farm are being scored for the habitat assessments. And this is important because any supporting action that you put into these areas will inevitably have an impact on the habitat score. So you just want to be aware as to what impact you're having on those plots. So as you can see, most of the extensive land up here is put down as semi-natural grassland. We have some scrub here, and we have a bit of riverside habitat being assessed here. Well, whilst most of this part of the farm is not being assessed for habitats, but we still want you to walk it for the runoff risk assessment. So I'll just turn that off now. We also have the PIP maps in, and from the PIP maps, I can see that there's a higher risk for nitrate loss on this part of the farm than it is in the rest of the part of the farm. And the likelihood is, if I turn on the soil maps, that this will be free draining. And yes, it is. So as we can see, this area is more freely draining than this section here. It's kind of that nearly that divide on the hill. On one side of the hill, it's poorly draining, and on the other side, it's more freely draining. So just to give you an overall impression before you go out into the field, so you're putting in the adequate sporting actions and ones that will actually make a difference. And now this is, I've said the aerial was one overview map that is important. The other would be the PIP flow paths. And as you can see, this gives you loads of detail as to where there are flow paths within the farm. We can see that there's actually a pretty extensive flow path here, and I'm definitely going to want to investigate this a bit further. So now that I have an overall impression, I'm going to go into each of the plots and just kind of go in a bit deeper, and make sure I'm not missing anything through either the aerial imagery, the flow pathways, or any other information. I can see here that there's a farm trackway going up the road here, splitting the farm, and I'm just going to stick back on those PIP flow pathways. And I can see that there's a delivery point over here. So, and I can see that there's a farmyard. What have the lads said here? Oh yeah, overland flow from land towards farm roadway. So I might just, yeah, I'm going to put that in and make sure I assess that later. That's fine. I'll move up then. And I can see that there's a number of flow pathways, and they're coming through what seems to be a bit of a pinch point here. So I can see, I'm just going to turn this off so I can get a better view. I can see that there's a tree line here and what might be a fence. So there might be a gateway or something here. And I can see that there's tracks from cattle. So this might be a bit of a pinch point here. So I'm going to add in this because I'm afraid that there might be issues with poaching on a very significant flow pathway. So I'll just put that in here. Potential poaching at pinch point with flow pathway present. And I'll just close that there, and it's saved. I forgot to mention as well, if you want to be able to read the legends for these, you can just scroll down and it'll describe everything that's been shown. So I can see here that this is a high, fairly significant high flow path, and that means it just has a high amount of velocity, and it's probably far more likely to carry water. So I'll just turn that off again. Actually, no, I'll leave it on because I know I want to go down here, and I definitely want to check where these delivery points and make sure that they're adequately buffered from the field. So I'm just going to add another point of interest here, and I'll say infield flow pathway. Really what you're doing here is you're kind of selecting the one that is most aligned with what you're viewing, but it's the comments that are most helpful. You can actually just describe it, and it gives you a reminder when you're out in the field using the app. So I'm just adding in all details. And remember, you'll be doing this assessment in the field with the farmer. So, you'll be quizzed about different things. They'll be distracting you. The best time to get this stuff onto paper to make sure you can remind yourself to go and see it is when you're sitting in peace in the office at home. Again, I can see here that there's a bit of either a drain or a stream or something coming in this way. And I can see that trackway is going across the stream here. So what I'll do is I'll just turn this off. I definitely want to see to make sure that there's no issues with the crossing here, that the culvert is all put in place properly, and that also that there's no issues with sediment runoff or phosphate or anything going into the stream here. So I'll add that in as a point of interest as well. So really, this is my kind of hotspot in the farm. Oh, and just to make the point, we can see that this is the border between two flow units. You can only add these points in a flow unit. So I'm just going to put it right next to it there. And I'll say livestock machine crossing point. Again, you don't need to go into as much detail, or you can go into way more details, whatever you want, whatever you think is helpful when you're out in the field. I would say write as much as you can now to remind yourself when you're out there. So moving on, I'm going to continue checking these flow pathways, and I can see that flowway is kind of still significant, and it's actually crossing over the track there. So I just want to see if the water is actually being redirected along the pathway here. So I'll add in another point of interest at the base of that flow pathway there. Yeah, I'll just do it up here because I'm already checking down there. So here we go. And I'll say farm roadway this way. Flow pathway crosses farm track. Now moving on, I'm going to again just have a look in and around that farmyard there. It's definitely not, what did they say it was a farmyard? Storage shed. Yes, this is not going to be a significant pressure. I still want to go and make sure that if they're storing anything like silage or whatever up here, or anything that might be maybe machinery that might lose oil, who knows? We'll just go and check it. And I want to make sure that this, as I can see that the watercourse makes its way down towards this pond, I'm going to make sure that this watercourse is also assessed. So I'll check it out down here, just make sure it's not being drained or that it isn't a really serious vector for pollutants. So I'll just add that in here. You can also see that there's a number of flow pathways making their way down to this drainage ditch. So I'll just, where this whatever it is, so I'll just make sure it's not being dug out. I'm just saying to check that it's not being drained as it's coming from the farm building and the potential flow pathway. So that would be a fairly significant kind of water course going down towards this pond here. Now I'm just going to check on this here, and I can see that there's silage and bale storage. That's what they're saying. Check for effluent and dumping in the area of potential runoff into ponds and drains. That's grand. What's this other one though? It's saying it's a farmyard. Oh, I don't think that's a farmyard. That's definitely just like an area that's being mounded. What did they say? Oh, test data out yard. What I'm going to do is then I'm going to delete this feature because I just don't think it's necessary. I'm already going to that point of interest, and it's just kind of making the map look a bit busy. So what you can do is you can delete any of these features. You can also add in any information you want to existing features there, just to show that you can do that. Moving on then, I can kind of see again that over this section, there seems to be a number of kind of like flow pathways or something. They seem to, but they're not. They only seem to be evident from the aerial imagery, and the reason why that is because when I put on the soil types here, I can see that this is in freely draining soil, but it's right next to poorly draining soil, and there's a potential that these soil maps might not be terribly accurate. So what we'll do is we'll use the aerial imagery, and we'll also use we'll also make sure to be careful and err on the side of caution, and we'll still go and check these, see if they're flow pathways. So what I'll do is I'll put in a point of interest and see if it's a flow pathway. Actually, zooming in there, I might, yeah, I can see there's cattle, and there's actually areas that might be a bit exposed. It's probably more likely that this is just rushes, but I'll just make sure that it isn't poached as well, and that there's no sediment loss here. So what I'll do is I'll go and edit this, and I'll say NPL flow pathway. Check to see if flow pathway is present, and if they're perfect. And again, just scouting around, and I can see potentially old drainage here. it's likely not an issue. But again, better safe than sorry. I'll go and have a look at it. It might not be visible when I first look into the field, but once I get to it, it could actually be a bit of a divot with something going on. So I'll say drainage. Check drainage. Again, as much detail as you want. This seems like it's more likely a hill, and it's, as I can see from the shadows, that it's just the shadow has been picked up from the side of the hill. But again, I'd rather just go and check it. So I'm just going to add it in as a potential flow pathway. And again, the reason why I'm putting all these things in is because you might not actually see these when you first go into the field. It might be a nice day, and there might not be any of this extra information, or you might just not be benefiting from the fact that you're looking at it from above. Again, all kind of pathways here, you can kind of see just from the contours and from the shadows that there seems to be stuff going down this way. I'm also probably going to check stuff like that out as well. So I'll just add in a point here. Having a scout around then, I can't really see if there's any other issues here. So I'm fairly happy. I'll give it one last look over to make sure I've added everything that I want. What I can do is I can go into these and review each of them. But if I'm happy with where everything's going, it's all fine. If you click on any of these, it'll bring you to the one that you're focusing on. It'll also bring you to the farmyards as well. If I know anything about this farmyard, or if I've been given any details from the farmer, if I just know because I've been on the site before, I can add in details here from memory as well. I'm just scrolling down. Is there anything else I've missed? Oh yeah, I haven't looked at the pip-p maps, and I can see that I haven't looked at the pip-p maps because each of these ones that I've opened have been previously checked. So I can check to see if I've missed any of these overlaid maps. And again, the pip-p maps show a similar enough story. It's the poorly drained soil has a slightly higher risk for phosphate, and that's expected. Again, I might check groundwater vulnerability. Oh God, there we go. That's something that I didn't expect. So because this is poorly draining, and this is freely draining, I would have thought that it wouldn't be so exposed, but actually the rock is near surface here. So we're really close to the aquifer. So we're in, especially on the poorly draining soil, where we must be only within a meter or two of the groundwater there. So the soil is probably quite shallow. So that's just something to be aware of. Putting in, digging any ditches or putting any sediments or anything like that, or putting in anything, just to be aware that the soil type is quite shallow here. So I'll take note of that before going out. And that's really it. So the next stage after that point would be to save the URA. So I click this button here. That's updating it, and that'll all be uploaded to your phone then. What you have to do then is fetch the data on your app, and then you'll be ready to go. But the main thing I'd say to this point is call the farmer then and try and arrange to meet him on site, and you'll want to just make sure that they're available as well. We might stop for questions now on this first section, and then we'll go on to the app after that.
Thank you, Mark. So we do have a couple of questions in.
Yep.
There's one of them I might throw to you before we move to Anne, because I might just get you to re-demo editing those points, specifically how you delete and move them. Just a quick re-demo on that.
Yeah, will do. So say if I have put this, any of the points, so I'll just pick this one over here, this flow pathway here. It's actually not going there, it's going somewhere else. So what I'll do is I can either click on it, which is the easiest thing to do, and I can see that it's F23, so that's fine. I can either edit the information here, or I can go to F23, which is this one here, edit it, and hang on. Oh, have we missed something here? Oh yeah. Very good point. And remember, I said at the start of this is a developing app, so we can do that with these farmyards, but we'll need to add that in for the points of interest, and we'll have
Brilliant.
that in before you're doing it. So thank you for whoever noticed that, and that there isn't a edit point on this.
Gold star, Chris.
Potentially James, who's on this, will see that. That's grand. I can add that in.
And then just another question that came in, which we'll throw to Anne, and it's just that question around the whole farm being scored, Anne. Why is the whole farm not being scored? And then can we actually amend the boundaries of the flow units or subdivide them?
Mark, would you mind zooming out and just turning on the habitats in this farm, and I can explain why the whole farm isn't being scored. So in this farm, you'll see that there's areas of semi-natural grassland, as Mark pointed out earlier, and there's this greyed out area that's classed as not scored. When the habitats were being mapped on the farm, a combination of aerial imagery and expert opinion was used to assign habitat. So really we employed a company who has a lot of experience in this to do the mapping of the habitats for us. And from the aerial imagery and their experience, they would be able to make a very good assessment of what the habitat type was like. Where it was very obviously improved grassland, so you're talking about perennial ryegrass or ryegrass and clover, recently reseeded, it wouldn't reach a payable score on a scorecard. It wouldn't reach a score of 4 out of 10. So there'd be very little point in going to the effort of walking that and scoring it just to find out that it wasn't going to score highly. The farmer might be very happy to manage that land the way he's managing it and have it as an improved grassland and get the yields from that. So he might not want to change his management practices. However, in some cases, when you go out, you might say, well, you know what? This is not far off being a semi-natural grassland, and it mightn't get a repayable score this year, but if you change your management practices a little bit, we might get a score next year. So you can actually change the scorecard. You can assign a scorecard to that if you wish and score it. So there is that option there. But the reason is to kind of limit how much effort you have to put into scoring the farm and not having advisors walking areas that don't need to be walked or that won't benefit the farmer in terms of paying out. But there is that flexibility to revisit it and assign a different scorecard.
And just to jump on that point, Anne, if that's okay, again, we have the habitats that are being assessed, but we will be assessing the entirety of the farm for the runoff risk assessment.
Yeah.
Just to make that clear.
Yeah.
Just one more question to add in there, and if we don't score a field this year, can we score it next year?
Yes, you just won't. If you don't score it this year, it won't be paid on this year, obviously, but you can score it next year, and it'll be paid on if it reaches a payable score next year. The fields are scored every year, so they'll be paid on every year if they reach the required score.
And again, sorry to keep adding, but if you go out to a plot and you think that it should be scored and it hasn't been scored, you can let us know and we can look to bring that in for the following year.
Just one more question that's come in there. So in this case, is there any point adding points of interest on areas that aren't eligible?
Okay, that's an interesting question. The points of interest are about the runoff risk assessment, and the runoff risk assessment, primarily about the runoff risk assessment, and the runoff risk assessment is about reducing the risk to water quality over the whole farm. So it's not about the results-based payments. They are only applied to the scored habitats, but we will pay for supporting actions anywhere on the farm, regardless of whether the plot is scored or not, if the measure that's proposed will help reduce the risk to water quality. So there's kind of two elements. There's the results-based element, and then there's the element of us paying for actions on the farm that will help reduce the risks to water quality, any risk that might exist anywhere on the farm. Does that kind of answer the question there? So there's absolutely huge benefit in putting in these points of interest anywhere you find them on the farm.
Paul?
Yeah, sorry, just maybe to clarify for people, obviously that this training is about the runoff risk assessment, and we show the scored areas just for further information, but that will all be dealt with in the scoring training, which is next week. So just so people aren't getting confused between the two processes.
Yep. The only reason why we have them up there is because just to give you awareness as to where they are, and if you're putting in any measures, there might be an influence on those. Yeah.
So, for example, you might be getting a reduced score on your semi-natural grassland because of poaching or around a drinking point, or if it's by a riverbank because animals are accessing the river. So, and there's damage to the riverbank. So putting in an MPI in somewhere or a supporting action there kind of multiple benefits. It can reduce the risk to water quality, but it could also help the habitat score. So that's just, I suppose, it's there as information. And as Paul says, today is just about the runoff risk assessment, and more detail on the habitats and the scoring. Those will be covered next week in that training.
Mark, we've all our questions covered for that section before we move on to the mobile phone app itself and the on-site assessment.
Perfect. So I can go on then, can I?
Yes, please.
Yes, perfect. So I just have a pre-recorded version of the app here, so we'll just go through that now. Before I start, I will make 2 points, and these I don't want to obviously tell advisors kind of how to suck eggs, but like just a few points that'll help you before you go out onto site. Make sure that you have you've submitted the desktop assessment, the overview, online. So once you've finished with it online, you have to press save, or else it will not be available on the Waters Life app. Also, you need to load up the farm while you have data. You can do the assessment without data. It doesn't require data for the entire assessment, but it does need to be loaded on the app before you can do it. Also, just make sure when you're going to the farm that you're going to bring all the details you need. So obviously this is Waters a Life-based project, but if the farmer happens to be in acres, or if they're doing anything else, it's probably best for you, if you're also their advisor for acres, to make sure you brought any sporting actions you're doing with acres with you, just so you know that there's going to be a conflict between the two. Also, just getting any information that you have about the farm in advance. Make sure the farmer is aware that you're coming, and that they're going to be doing the assessment with you. And also realize when you're going to the site that you are an ambassador for the project. So really what you're trying to do is you're trying to both educate the farmer on the issues with water quality. You're trying to see how much they know about issues with water quality, and also you're trying to get uptake for those supporting actions. What will I say as well is make sure they know it's voluntary as well, and that there is no issues with there's no authority behind us. So like you will be assessing their farmyards. Let them know that all the information is confidential between the two of you. But Anne will talk about that a bit later. So I'll just get on now with the app. So here we go. We open the app, and we're going to put in our email and our passwords that we've used previously. Again, hopefully this will just fill yes. Again, you'll be asked to do two-factor authentication. So I'm just going to put in my verification again from my authenticator. I'm using Google Authenticator here. So I'm adding that in. Again, this constantly changes, so there's no worry you seeing it. When you go in, you'll see the farms that are available to you. I'm going to click back into that grainy farm at the top. And that should open it as soon as I do it. And what I'll be asked to do is fetch the runoff risk assessment. If you've done this stage back in the office, when you open the app, you should immediately just see the farm, because you'll need internet access to do that fetching. And what you'll immediately be greeted with is the 2 flow units and the 2 farmyards, and you need to assess each of those separately. So that's why you have 0 out of 4 assessed at the top right there. You'll also be shown where you are on the map. I'm not, when I was doing this, I wasn't on this farm, so the little blue dot where it usually shows you where you are isn't available there. But what you can do is you can press go to my location there. You can also press on any of the flow units or the farmyards, and they'll bring you over to the point. So what I'm going to select now is the farmyard that I have met the farmer in. And the likelihood is I've met the farmer there, and I'm going to do a farmyard assessment first, because that's just the initial meeting point. So there are two aspects to the farmyard assessment. There is the first aspect, which is mapping where the water flows in and out of the farm, and whether or not it's going into drainage ditches, if it's going into subsurface water, or if it's going into overland flow pathways. And then there's a second part, which is basically just us asking you if you've had a chat to the farmer about compliance. And I will go over to Anne now, who might explain a bit more about that chat about compliance.
Thanks, Mark. As you know, Waters of Life has no role in compliance, in cross-reporting, in enforcement. We're here to fund measures that go beyond basic conditionality, but it's a really important service to the farmer to bring any issues on the farmyard that would be that wouldn't comply with basic conditionality to their attention. So when you're there, we would expect you to check their storage facilities, check their soiled waters going to where it should, that it's all contained, that silage effluent's contained, that roof water separated from yard water, all the basic stuff under the GAP regulations. But that is just then a conversation between you and the farmer, letting him know if he has any compliance issues and giving him advice as to what he should do about it. But that is confidential between you and the farmer. We, in our payment structure, we've allowed for you to provide that service, but we don't need to know about it. You don't need to report it back to us. All you need to report back to us are the measures that go beyond basic conditionality. But you do need to confirm to us that you've done that assessment and you've had that conversation with the farmer. But again, as I say, there's no cross-reporting and there's no enforcement element to this project. It's a service to the farmer that's in his best interests or her best interests. Thanks. Over to you again, Mark.
Yeah, so we're not expecting any information back from anything that is in breach of conditionality, just to say that point. The only question you're going to be asked is, have you had the conversation? And if you had, that's as much as we want to know. So then moving on from that, I'm just going to show you an example here of how we're doing this. Just to make the point, hang on, we're just going into the farmyard mapping now. So I've noticed, for example, this farm, that there is water flowing off this north field. It's coming into a bit of a ditch there, or not ditch, just an area, and it's flowing across the field, or across the farmyard. And this looks like it's a roadway on the right here. It's actually not. It's just it's a small track that actually leads up to the top of the field. So the farmyard actually takes up all of the space here. So water flowing down from the field. Yeah. Now this is the inflow. You may have multiple inflows coming from different sections. If I were you, I would zoom in a bit closer there when you're mapping all this. There might be areas coming in the back of a shed. There could be stuff coming off roofs and ponding in a certain area. Just be aware of it all. But the majority of the water here is actually flowing, and it's pooling here, and it's actually going into this through this gate here. Again, this is all just the standard trackway. The farmyard really does extend across here, and it's actually sloping across here and then going down into the field. So I'm just putting in that it's doing that. I'm describing that. Yeah. If this was a road, it would usually have a ditch next to it or a bit of a camber on the road, but because it's a normal, just simple little trackway, that's why it's not stopping the water from flowing into the field. Okay. So I've actually registered that now as I want to follow up now to see where that pollutant, the effluent, is actually running away from. So I'm going to then go into the F2 flow unit there, the one on the right, just to try and see where that pollutant pathway is going to. So I'm going to go into start flow unit assessment on this flow unit, the one on the right here. When I go into it at first, it'll show me where all of the points of interest that I have described are. I can also press the lines at the top there, on the top right, and it'll give me an overview as a description for each of those flow units. I'm going to press it now in a second. You'll see. So here you can see the descriptions for each of the points of interest with all of the notes that I've made about each one of them. And I can also scroll down and I can put on any of the overlays that were available to me on the overview map. So you have your pip maps, your soil types, but most importantly, you have there your pip flow paths. So again, that's just showing that I'm working in an area that is going to be assessed for the habitats. But I want to put on the flow paths to see if there's any map flow paths. Oh, I first of all checked to see the phosphate pip maps. And yes, it is an issue with pip P. Again, no issues with pen. I'll eventually get to that flow path now. And there we go. We've added them in. Just going to turn off that pip N now. So I can see the map a bit clearer. So I can see that there is a few delivery points there. They're the ones, little dots on the right. So I'll definitely want to walk down to those and check to see if there is any water flowing into them. And the best way to check that is to see if there's any dips or erosion points, or if all the grass is flat down in a certain direction, and that'll just show me where it is. So I've already actually added in a point of interest there to check this gateway, and I can see, yes, there is a bit of a flow pathway going down towards the river, and I can see that unfortunately some of the pollutants from the farmyard are making their way down to the river. So I'm going to want to address those. So I put in the pressure point there, and I've mapped the direction that the water is flowing down to the river. And I'm going to put in the pressure type. So I have an option between bare soil, infill, land drainage, livestock access, or other. Or I can pick between observed and potential risk. You can always click those eyes, as I do, and you can get full descriptions as to what they mean. So you're picking the best one for you that matches up, or other. And really it's in the description, in the notes that you're going to make. The reason why I've picked observed risk here is because I can actually see the pollutants making their way down to the river. They're unobstructed, there's a pathway down to it, and I need to address it. Whereas with the potential risks, there might be a pathway, but I currently can't see it at this time of the year, because either the grass is fully grown, or there's the climatic factors aren't there at the moment for me to observe it. But what I'm going to do here is I've decided I'm going to move that gate. I want to move it about 10 meters or 20 meters up the pathway a bit, so the pathway is diverted. And the farmer's happy to do that as long as he gets support to do it. So I'm just looking here to put in gateway measures. They're all the various supporting actions that you can put in. And I'm going to give a description as to what I want to do. So I'm going to move that gateway up the way a bit. And just to make the point, this is obviously a farm that does exist, but all of these are just scenarios. There's no issues with this farm in real life. Well, there might be, but we haven't done assessment yet, but these are all just made up. So when I'm going to place where I'm going to put that gateway, and as you can see, this is a point. You'll be told what kind of mapping you're using at the bottom. So gateways are points, so we just put 1 point down. Has the farmer agreed to it? Yes, but they do want a bit of support, so they're going to avail of that contractor mobilization fee. Farmer is happy to move the gateway 20 meters up. That's fine. I have addressed now the issue with the gateway, but now I just have a hole in the hedge and on the one that's already there. So I need to put in a second supporting action in the form of hedgerow establishment and also an earth bund, just to connect up the existing hedgerow that's already there. So that's what I'm just describing I'm going to do here now. Skip ahead there a bit, just describing that I'm going to put in a hedgerow along that section. As you can see, for this supporting action, it's a line. It says line string at the bottom there, so I know I have to put in a line. I'm just putting in a line there as to where I want to put in the supporting action. Has the agreement agreed to it? Yes, but they again want support doing it. You can put in no here if you have a supporting action that you think should go in here, but the farmer doesn't want to do it, and you want to follow up with him again to try and see if he will do it or not. But yeah, it will only obviously go ahead with supporting actions that have farmer agreement. So I've done there now, and I'm working my way up the farm, and I'm going to check all these flow pathways and also delivery points, and I'm going to check up these points of interest. So we're back here now at this crossing point where that trackway goes across, and there's actually no issues here. The trackway is fairly well buffered. There's no issues with runoff coming from the track into the water, and it's the best kind of scenario for this trackway. The trackway has to exist there, and it's not in a particular load for sediment or phosphate or anything like that. I'm going to go over to this pinch point. And again, the farmer is with me the whole time here. He's actually confused as to why we're going up here because he's already told me that that he doesn't really use his field that much for holding cattle. So he only just keeps one or two in here to separate them off when needed. But we're still going to go up and check it just to be sure. So I've checked that area there, and he's right. There's no issues of poaching here on this flow pathway. It's actually quite overgrown, and the farmer has told me that he's never had an issue at this area. I put on the Fiplo pathways just to be sure. And I'm going to go down and check all the delivery points. But this field is actually looking like it's going to score quite well in the habitat assessments when we eventually do that, because it's lush, it's full, and it's actually well buffering. I'm going down to this river now, and I've checked it, and actually it's 10 meters wide, the buffer. There's no way anything is running off into this field. So I don't need to do anything here. I can move on. So that's great. That one critical source area really that I thought I had noticed on the desktop overview is actually not in it. There's no problems there at all. So I'm going to make my way now and go into the second flow unit. But I've seen that there's a farmyard across the way. So, sorry. First of all, I need to put in what my overall risk category is. So this is when I've finished doing the assessment for this flow unit. I submit it, I save it, and I have to give an overall risk category. So you could have a few different types of risks present that you've identified, but we always go with the one that's the most severe. So I've observed, or I have an observed risk. So I'm going to put down that the overall risk category is observed for this one. Again, if you want to just read there, that's the options you can go with. And you can always press that I when you're out in the field to get a reminder as to what they are. So now I'm going to move on to this second flow unit. But I've seen there's a farmyard there, so I'm going to go over and assess that first before I assess the flow unit. Again, this is the one that I noticed was just a shed, so I'm not expecting there to be much of an issue here. And as I arrive, yeah, it's just being used for a bit of storage. There's actually not much going on here. I checked the flow paths, and there's actually no issues with flow paths. Most of the water in and around the shed is just coming from the roof, and it goes directly into the groundwater. But sometimes the farmer has said there's a bit of pooling in and around the guttering or where the water flows off the roof, and it can, I'm presuming, make its way towards that nearby drainage ditch or stream or whatever it is. So I'm going to go and check that as well. So I'll just quickly put those in. That's probably flowing down south there, southeast towards that ditch. So I'll just quickly put them in so I have something in. But again, not a pressure really. Into water network. I'm just skipping ahead there a bit so I can put all that information in. Perfect. And as I'm looking at this stream, sorry, now I'm going to go in and do the flow unit assessment bit. So I have to go back out, click on it, start the flow unit assessment. I'm still where I am though, so I'm going to, I've noticed that I've missed actually something there. I want to go back and check that farm roadway. I think there is an issue where that crosses a pip flow pathway. So I'll just quickly have a check. And even though there is a flow path, there's no issues with where it's going across. It's not being redirected by that road. The water's not being taken away from and creating kind of an erosion along the gravel path. So there's no issues there. I'm just going to move on. I'll make my way down then the stream again, and I'm going to check where that water course. Oh yeah, I've said I want to check if this water course is being drained out, and it absolutely is not. It's a lovely little stream actually. There's various habitat for fish. The farmer is actually quite proud because he stocked that pond 20 years ago with trout, and the trout are now breeding in this stream. He says so. He's delighted with himself. So we're not going to touch that, and he's not going to touch it either. You're confident because he wants it for his trout. But I have noticed some bare soil over this way that I didn't notice when I was doing the overview map. So I'm actually going to walk over to the farmer. And the farmer, I can see from him that he did actually do a bit of work on this drainage ditch in the past. But it started to revegetate. And he says he doesn't have any plans to do anything in the near future. I said that if you want, you can put in some buns there and we can really kind of keep slow the flow on this section here, because there's a bit of a risk at the moment, because I can see kind of some sediment. But the farmer says no, he's not going to touch it again. He's just going to let it revegetate. So you're happy with that then? You've decided nothing needs to go in here if you're just going to let it revegetate. So I've said no supporting action. And I'm just going to make the point that farmer said they would let the drain revegetate, but they don't want to do anything else. So what I'll do is I'll check that again the following year, or when I'm doing the habitat assessments, just to make sure that it is continuing to revegetate. So I'll make my way down these farms, and it's all extensive grazing. There's no issues really here. I'm going to go over to this area here where it says there's silage bale storage. And actually, that wasn't the case at all. This is just the old spoil heap from when the pond was created, and it was well cordoned off at the time, and it's completely vegetated now, so there's no issues with that. And I'm going to move on, and I'm going to move into this field, and yeah, this field is actually full of cattle, and unfortunately, there is an area of poaching in and around this area, just a mucky section that is kind of releasing sediment phosphate down into a flow pathway that's making its way down to here. So we're going to need to do something about this. It's joining that drain and it's carrying on. So I'm just showing where the water flows off of the farm, and I just want to make the point that it is flowing that direction. This is just for future reference. And I can see a potential risk here because when I was there during the period of time, it wasn't particularly bad, and there was some sections being buffered by rushes, but the flow path was significant, and I thought that if this was a heavily stocked field, or if there was any further risk of erosion, if it got worse, then there would be an issue with phosphate getting down into the river. So what I want to do is I want to put in a small buffer at the delivery point, and I also want to fence off that drain, because the drain itself is actually fairly sparse. It doesn't have any vegetation around it, and the cattle are kind of right up next to it. So the farmer is happy to put in a fence there. They want to avail of the measure, because there's currently no fencing along that ditch. So I'm going to put it there. I'm first of all mapping this spatially targeted buffer. And as you see, that's a polygon, because spatially targeted buffers can be in any shape or size. So, well, actually, there's a max size you can put them in, but that's why you have to draw them. So you just put out the points, and then it'll draw out the square. So put in what the farmer agrees to. So he agrees to a 5 meter by 7 meter zone for the spatially targeted buffer. So I managed to type it. Sorry, hang on. I'll just finish the type it. Yeah. Then I'm asked if I want to add another supporting action. I do. I want to put in that fencing. So I'm going to put in a single strand electric fence. And I've said to the farmer, how far out do you want to put it? And he said, this doesn't want to go any further than 3 meters. And I'm like delighted, because 2 meters is the minimum, but I won't say that to him. So I'll let him put in 3 meters if he wants to. Again, I think this field is scored. So if him putting in this 3 meter wide section along this will also help benefit his habitat scores as well, because the drain will hopefully revegetate better. So again, just putting in those comments. Just skip ahead there a bit. And I have no more supporting actions to put in, so I'm going to say no, and I'm going to go back down now, and I'm going to check out those other areas. So this drainage ditch doesn't exist. I don't know what the story is with the maps. I don't know why it's showing up on a map like that, but when I went down to check it, could not for life me find it anywhere. So it's not there. So I'm moving on. And again, this is just a shadow. The small camber on a hill, and it's not an issue. There's no issues in this field for pressures. Again, the same with this. There is a bit of a flow pathway there, but it's very insignificant and also very well buffered by vegetation. I'm going to go down, and I've noticed this on the map, something I didn't notice online. Oh, there's a bit of a exposed kind of area here, but when I arrive, I can see that this is actually just an area that was clear to scrub at a certain point, but it's completely revegetated now, and there's no issues. So I'm going to finish up my flow unit assessment. I'm going to put down that there was a potential risk seen, and then I'm going to submit it. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to press upload draft assessment, and that'll upload this assessment online for me to go and review when I go back to the office. Am I missing anything from this? No, that's us done. You can stop sharing there now. You can see all my YouTube watching.
Lovely work, Mark. Thank you very much. We've had some really good questions come in again. We're grateful to get them, and you still have time to submit them. And I'll bring you in to field a couple of these. So we'll start with just the idea of accessing the runoff risk assessment itself. So when you go to fetch that button on the app, we might just address that one for starters.
Yeah, I can address that. So that when you press fetch, you do need an internet connection, and that'll bring in the overview of the farm. What you can do is you make sure to press that fetch button before you go out to the farm. And what we want to do as well, we're working on building in a mechanism that'll just download each of the farms as you've done them, and you can have them all loaded into your farm, into your hand before you go out. But for the moment, it's only the one farm that you can fetch and have open before you go out into the field. But bear with us, we're working to get that addressed, because we do want it to be as available offline as possible.
Can I just add a little bit to that?
Yeah.
If you go into the app and you go fetch runoff risk and you get an error message to say you can't access the runoff risk, it's probably because you haven't done your prep on the desktop yet. You have to go into the desktop portal. You have to do your overview of the farm. If there's points of interest, you have to add those. And then the really important bit is you have to go save runoff risk assessment. Only once you've gone through that process will you be able to fetch your runoff risk assessment in the app, either on or offline. So just to be aware of that. But I would say go in and have a play with with the farm that's available to you at the moment and see how that all works. Christopher, you've put your hand up again. I hope we can let you talk, but
So
if not,
I've
you might.
allowed Mike there. So Chris, if you want to try and unmute yourself.
Hi, yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Hi, yeah. So I did the portal thing with Mark there. I saved it, and when I go into the app, it did load up the farm. I went into the farm, clicked on the fetch runoff risk assessment, and all it does is it's just loading. It's not actually entering the farm. It's just loading and loading. I've closed the app, opened it, tried again. It just keeps loading. So I don't know if one of you can try it on your phone now, see if it comes up. But on my side, it just keeps loading.
What is the? You can tell me that doesn't make it. What's the number on the farm that you have?
GRA 000104.
04. Okay, that's perfect. I'll take a note of that. But yeah, that's interesting. We ran this about 7 or 8 times with testing, and it's worked for everyone else's. So I will follow. We'll make sure to follow up with you with that. But it should just load once you've done the runoff risk assessment online.
Yeah.
You may have to have you logged out of the app and restarted it?
Yeah, I'll try again. But yeah,
you shouldn't have to do that anyway. That's an issue if it's coming up.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
Just,
I don't. Yeah.
Okay. It is the first rollout of this, and we do envisage there will be glitches, but the developers on hand to address any bugs that crop up. So anything like that, do bring it to our attention, and we'll try and get it sorted as quickly as possible.
Some other really good questions in there. Is there any functionality that's available on the desktop that isn't available on the app?
Offhand, Sorry, Anne, do you want to go ahead? Yeah.
I don't think you can add points of interest on the app. I think that has to be done in advance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
That's
really, those points of interest are to guide you when you're doing the app assessment anyway. So, yeah.
And can you
Unless,
delete
yeah,
points of interest on the app to remove any doubt later is another question that came in.
that came in earlier as well, didn't it, Mark? And we realized that
deleting.
you couldn't, yeah, that we weren't able to delete or edit them. So we have to go back and get that functionality added.
Yeah. Okay. So then some really good questions around basically the decision-making process with the farmer. So let's look at a situation where the farmer says yes to an action on the day, but then essentially changes their mind. What happens in that case?
Okay, well, there's two actually. I gave an answer in the chat, but then there's a second scenario as well. So if a farmer says yes on the day and you submit the runoff risk assessment, it'll come to us with the list of proposed measures. We'll put them through two checks. One is it the right measure in the right place? And then we'll do an environmental screening to make sure there's no unintended negative consequences of the action. Once we're happy, we will approve the action for installation, and you and the farmer will be notified that the actions that have been approved will be notified to you both. At that point, it's up to the farmer to decide if they want to go ahead or not. It's entirely voluntary. If they go ahead and they send in the required verification, they'll be paid. If they don't go ahead, then they won't be paid. But really, we'd be hoping that you as advisors would be able to sell the benefits to them. The other scenario that I didn't mention in the chat is you would be able to ask us to reopen once you've submitted the runoff risk assessment, you can't edit it again unless you come to us and ask for it to be reopened, and we can reopen it and you can change what's in there at that point. And that kind of covers what came up in another question, the opposite question. If a farmer says no and then says yes, that's how that would be dealt with, that you would come to us and say, look, I want to make some changes to the runoff risk assessment and proposed actions. Can you reopen the RA for me again?
And how late could that happen?
That's a good question. We haven't set a deadline on that, but obviously, from an administrative point of view, it makes things difficult for us if it's constantly changing and we're constantly issuing revisions, and it also holds up payments to the farmer. I would say for the time being, we'd say probably about 4 weeks would be the maximum, but we will keep that under review and see to what extent it's becoming an issue.
Okay, great. Thanks a million. We're in the home stretch, folks, and the questions are really, really valuable, as are the comments and anything that you flag with us. There's one more question in before we move on to the final section, and that would just be what timeline would the farmer have to complete the actions?
I think we have set a timeline in the terms and conditions, but I can't remember offhand what it is. But I would say there's not particularly a tight timeline. We would be encouraging farmers to go ahead as quickly as possible, because then it gives us the longest opportunity to monitor the effectiveness of the measures. But we're happy to pay the farmer for the measure when it goes in. So at this stage, I would say there probably is a lot of flexibility around that.
But the sooner they do it, the more benefit it would be to their farm and ultimately the reward from the project.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So, Mark, we have one final section to go through. We've looked at it we've prepared for this runoff risk assessment via the desktop portal. Now we've been on site and we have looked at it on our smart device on our app. What happens next?
Perfect. So the next stage is we go back in to the online portal and we log in as per usual, and we go back into the field. And I'm just going to show into the farm of question, and we log back into the runoff risk assessment. And as soon as you log back into the runoff risk assessment, you'll be met with all of the measures that you put into place. And again, this is really just a review of the information that you've collated when you're out in the field. When we're aware that when you're in the field, you'll be with the farmer and you'll also be out in the elements. There might be issues you put in things in the wrong place, or you were distracted when you were trying to put something in. So you'll all of this is really for you to add in bits that you've missed, or to make modifications to your notes. So one thing, for example, I'll just go through how you might go about doing that. I've put in a spatially targeted riparian buffer here, with the single strand electric fence. But when I reviewed the spec for the spatially targeted riparian buffer, that's just a buffer zone that's been assigned to allow the area to revegetate. It doesn't actually pay for anything like the single strand electric fence that goes around it, or any tree planting. And I discussed with the farmer, they actually want to plant this with some native hardwood, and they also want to put a fence around it. So I'm going to need to put those in now as well, as additional supporting actions. So what I do is I go over to this. I can see that the pressure detail here, and these are the supporting actions that will address that potential pressure. So I'm going to put in a what is it? A single strand electric fence, just really an extension of that other one. Well, actually, yeah, that's a good point. I don't need to put a new one. All I need to do is redraw this one. So I'll redraw this to go around this this riparian buffer here. So I'm going to put it down here, and I'm going to redraw it around. What's great about using this the online portal is that because you're using a mouse and not your fingers in the field, you can be far more accurate as to the placement of everything. And it just allows you to be a bit more on the ball. So it also tells me what I'm mapping and the length of what I've mapped. So I can save all that now, and that's saved that thing, that potential pressure. What I need to do then as well is I need to add in some tree planting. So I'm going to go back into this. I can see that I have those, and I want to put in some tree planting as well to complement this. So I'm going to go down to tree planting. I'm going to press add, and I'm going to zoom into the area that I want to do it. I'm just going to overlay it on top of this spatially targeted buffer. I'm going to save it there. And I will just put in all the information that I previously put in. So native hardwood. Perfect. So that's done. I have the two here now. I have the tree planting and the spatially targeted riparian buffer put in, and all mapped. I also realized that when I was back here, that the farmer doesn't want to put in a bund here. They actually want to put in just a straight hedgerow. Again, just an example off the top of my head. I don't know if that's actually what he would do in this condition, but so what I'll do is I will delete this feature, and I will add another one again. And instead of, I'll do hedgerow establishment without earth bund, and I'll add that in here. Again, this is just a hedgerow to fill in the gap. So I'll just zoom out here again. Whoops, daisy. And I'll just put it in across here. Again, you might be better at coming up with reasons to put in other things. You might need to put in some fencing here as well to be there temporarily while the hedgerow develops. So that might be another measure that you might need to put in as well. But for now, I'm just going to leave it at that. Again, then I'm just going to go through each of these to make sure that they're all describing what I want, and that I have information on each one. I'm just going to go into them again just to make sure that all of the descriptions are where I want them to be. And once I'm happy with that, I can press submit. Again, this is just the issues in and around the farmyard. If any of these slipped, my finger slipped while I was putting them in, or if I've drawn them the wrong way around or something, I can edit all those as well. Again, I thank you, whoever noticed those points of interest, that they need to be able to be edited. We'll add that in as well, so they'll be able to edit it and review it at a later date. And yeah, that's pretty much it then. Once I press submit, then I will be shown a warning that submitting the ORA will prevent you from making any further changes. Again, the reason why we want to put this in is because we can't have people constantly editing as they go on, and eventually we need to have a package coming to us so we can screen all the supporting actions at once. But again, as Anne said, this can be reopened. You just have to send an email to us to get it reopened. So I won't press submit there just in case something happens. But when you press submit, you will have then an overview of all the measures that you have requested to be done on the farm. And that's really it then. That's the runoff risk assessment process finished. The next stage is goes over to us and we have to do our screening. But I'll let Anne maybe talk, or whoever is signing us out, to talk about the next steps and discuss that.
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, I'll just share screen again and talk you through what's going to be happening over the next few weeks and months. Bear with me a second. Can you see, am I sharing a slide?
Yep.
Okay, so at this stage, you all should have access to the app and the portal. If you haven't, just check your emails. For the time being, as Mark said, you will only have access to that one test farm, but your farmers will be added over the next few days. Again, as Mark also pointed out earlier, you will only see a reference number and the mapping for the farm for the moment, and this is for data protection reasons, to make sure, until we're sure that all the required securities are up to scratch in the app, and then we can add back in the personal data. But you will get a spreadsheet that will allow you to link the reference number to the farmer details. If you find any issues with the app, this is effectively a beta version. If you find any issues with it, come to us. We want this to be working as well as possible for you and for the farmers and for the project. So come to us with any issues, any improvements you think you could be made to it. We'd be delighted to hear them. You can email them in to watersoflife@housing.gov.ie. If you have issues in the short term, email them in and we can see if we can deal with them at the Habitat training next week. The next big thing that's happening is the Habitat training. So the Avonmore is on Monday, the Graney Tuesday, Obeg and Shornock Wednesday, Islands Thursday. All the events will be from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. Today, you will receive a confirmation of the exact location of the farm you will be visiting by email, along with some other useful information. You get a separate email asking you for bank details. If you're a private advisor, this doesn't apply to the Teagasc advisors, asking you to complete an EFT mandate form and send us in a copy of your bank statement header. So just look out for that as well. In terms of getting the work done, we would ask you to do the runoff risk assessment as soon as possible. Summer isn't the ideal time for seeing where water flows over a farm, but with the farmer with you and his knowledge of the seasonal changes on the farm, you should be able to do it quite well at this time of year. So we'd ask you, as soon as you've got your farmer's details, to get out and start doing the runoff risk assessment. And this is so that we can get the measures in place as quickly as possible and have the longest possible time to assess their effectiveness. Habitat scoring needs to be done over the summer and completed by the 15th of August. We would ask you to make separate visits for the runoff risk assessment and the habitat scoring. They're both quite time consuming, and we have built that into the payment structure for the private advisors, the fact that it will require 2 separate visits. And yes, what the other thing we would ask you to do is, when you're on the farm with the farmer, talk them through the general actions that have been made available to them in their farm plan. You will get a copy of all of the farm plans that were issued to your farmers over the next few days as well. So they'll be sent to you via a file cloud link and you'll be able to access them. So you'll see both the required measures such as the runoff risk assessment and the optional measures that are available to the farmer. In some catchments, things like ag nav and pasture base will be available, mob grazing, catch crops. We'd ask you to discuss all those with the farmer as well when you visit the farm and just encourage them to take up those measures. So that's everything from us.
A couple more questions, Anne.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Make one point as well, sorry, before you go in there, just to make it obvious that on the resources page within Waters Life, we do have a full guidance document on how to do all this. It'll cover everything I've said and more. So please go and read that. I think it was sent out to you in advance. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll
Thanks,
send
Mark.
it again. We'll send it again this afternoon.
Yeah.
Is there a funding limit per farmer?
Not at the moment. We deliberately didn't want to go down that route because we feel if there's benefits to measures, we should facilitate them going in. However, as the project develops, we'll have to see how our budget is working out.
Yeah. Can you talk to us about that August 15th deadline for completion of habitat scoring? Can you talk to us about why that deadline is in place? Because you've obviously got some very busy advisors. They might be busy with acres and other stuff.
June to August is the best time for assessing things like semi-natural grassland. The species that are of interest will be most obvious during that period. And also it allows us to process the data and to get it ready for payment. We would like to have all of our side finished. And then when we get the up-to-date LIPIS data from DAFM, we would be in a position then to go ahead with payments quite quickly. So it's for that reason, it's those two reasons. One, to ensure that the scoring goes ahead at the optimum time of year, and also to allow us to get the payments out to the farmers in a timely manner.
Okay. If there is any, if people are approaching that date and there's still a lot of farmers in the inbox, obviously it's just a case of coming to us, talking to us, and let us know what the situation is.
Yeah.
Okie doke. We have a chance to get people back to a bit more of a lunch break this afternoon if we can do that. So we'll leave it to you to wrap things up, Anne.
Okay, well, yeah, we've gone through the next steps. Thanks very much for coming along and staying with us for this morning, and thanks to Mark and Ross for Mark's great presentations and Ross's great management of the event. Be sure to send us in any further queries you have to the email address I showed you earlier, watersoflife@housing.gov.ie. And that really brings our event to a close. So thank you and have a good day.
Thanks, folks. Slán, take care.